going first. Marcia, going first.
The idea is to just the rest of you on the steps. Get too worried.
See it done!
See what you did to my brother?
See it done!
See what you lot did to my brother?
See it done! See it done!
And it represents
And no one's got anything to say, not even sorry.
See it done!
others who died in this police station. This one, here, this one, 2 years ago. Sean Rigg.
Have you got any bodies in there to go in here?
Nobody downstairs in the cell or
So
in the
there's no one to take responsibility.
no officer standing
Well,
around
everyone
the
suddenly
I'm livid. I'm absolute. I want you to go and tell you I am absolutely livid. I'm not afraid of anybody here. I'm livid. Absolutely livid. But I'll need to come out because I'm mad.
This is how we feel
It could be
when
my
you guys don't take care of our loved ones. Do you see what I mean? We've got a right. We've got a right to do this. Bring the inspector out. Tell
Bring
him to
Mom
come.
Wallace. Where's Suzanne Wallace? Can you bring her out, please? Is she on duty tonight? Oh, she's been transferred. I wonder why. Because they got her on tape saying that the camera was working. No, that's the public knowledge.
Every time we hush, and they have to on every feet, and on their feet. I told them no. I'm fighting with justice. You understand me? We don't have no more time to let them sit on power no more.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now!
My name is Marcia Rigg and I'm the sister of Sean Rigg. And that is just a trailer of a documentary that the family made along with Ken Pharaoh of Migrant Media called Who Polices the Police? And you can see a full copy of that online. And I urge you to watch the whole of Who Polices the Police, which shows the struggle that me and my family had during the investigation. And we'd done this before the actual inquest, and we put it online the day of the inquest verdict. So I'm not going to really go into the whole death of my brother. When you go online, you'll be able to have a look. What I'm going to inform you about is the update on the current issues on my brother's case. One of them is the retirement of police officers. And secondly is the Crown Prosecution Service coming back with a no case to answer. I'm going to speak briefly first about the resignation of PC Andrew Burks. Now, PC Andrew Burks, if you may have seen in the news recently, had resigned from the Metropolitan Police sometime in April 2014. And the build-up to this resignation was that in 2009, PC Burks had approached the Church of England to become a priest. And it was actually the funniest thing that I'd heard when I got a call from my solicitor. In fact, when he rang me and said, Marcia, are you sitting down? And when he eventually was able to spit out that PC Burks was about to be ordained, I literally fell on the floor laughing because it was just ridiculous and funny. But what's transpired since then is that we found out that we were going to have a meeting with the IPCC because there are 2 criminal investigations that were ongoing. And we wanted to know, I knew that officers always throw their last ace card. That is the card to get out of jail, and they always resign, usually during investigation. and they resign at that point in every case. But there was a slight difference in my brother's case, because I wanted, the IPCC were about to serve a notice on the officers to re-interview them under criminal caution, because the case had been reopened after this film, Who Polices the Police, the jury's damning narrative verdict at the inquest, and the jury were phenomenal. They were angels. And the IPCC then had to reopen the investigation, where they commissioned a review, the first of its kind, external, independent, which was truly independent, of the IPCC's original investigation, which found that investigation by the IPCC had been fundamentally flawed. In my opinion, it was a cover-up. It was all ex-police officers in the IPCC crawling all over my brother's case. And this is what has transpired now because of that original investigation. So in 2009, unbeknownst to the family, PC Andrew Burks approached the Church of England and wanted to become a priest. Bearing in mind, Sean had died in 2008. So obviously he was aware that there was going to be an inquest and so forth. And he approached the church, and he was given an interview and was told that in order to come into the church, he probably needed to... he approached the church in 2001, before Sean died. And they said that he should work within the community first before deciding to become involved in the Church of England. And that's when he became a police officer. And he had been a police officer for 7 years before Sean's death. And he was at the City of London Police. He then went to Brixton Police. Sean died in 2008. 2009, he approached the church. And then he started to do studies with the church. And in 2011, he started a degree in theology. Now, the Metropolitan Police, it's very important that you catch this bit, was aware of that. They had agreed his resignation, which didn't happen until April 2014. But they were allowing him to go and do his degree and study leave and all sorts. Okay, then in 2012, in 2010, the IPCC completed their report, which had been restricted to the public, but the family was aware of the contents. And I had branded that report to the Home Affairs Select Committee as Mickey Mouse. And we were vindicated at the end of the day with the jury. We didn't judicial review it at that time because the family felt that it wasn't no longer the IPCC's investigation. It was so pathetic. We wanted to show them up at the other end. And all we wanted was to gather the evidence because 18 months had passed. So that was in 2010. In 2012, we had the jury's inquest, the inquest into Sean's death. Now, the inquest is not a criminal court. It's not there to find the criminality of any officer. It's just an inquisition into who, when, where, and how. You know, how did he come to his death and what was his cause of death? The family were very much involved as an interested party in that inquest. And the jury vindicated the family's concerns and came with a very damaging verdict. Now, briefly, I would just say that the coroner did not allow the jury to come with an unlawful killing verdict, neither neglect, all on a technicality, and it could have collapsed the inquest. It was going on for 7 weeks. That could have collapsed the inquest because the family could have decided to judicial review at that point Because as far as I was concerned, it was an unlawful killing once you've heard all the evidence. But we were advised by our very good legal team, Hickman and Rose, Daniel Macover of Hickman and Rose, and our barrister is now Dr. Leslie Thomas QC of Garden Court Chambers, felt that the jury were extraordinary and we should have confidence in them. And that if they came with a narrative verdict, then instead of just using 2 words, unlawful killing, they could come with a more detailed analysis of what they thought happened, which was brilliant. So reluctantly, we decided to have confidence in the jury, and they did come correct. And and then the IPCC made public their report that was back in 2010. And there was a stark contrast between the IPCC's report and the jury's narrative. It was completely opposite. And that's what commissioned the Casale review, and who found that the investigation had been fundamentally flawed. And I would just tell you in 2 lines the IPCC's conclusion at that time. The police, this was their conclusion in 2.5 lines. The police adhered to policy during the transportation of Sean Rigg from the arrest scene to the station. They adhered to policy, and so they found no case to answer. This was during the time when Sean, the officers claimed that he was in the back of the van, in the footwell, which is a very small area, on his back with his handcuffs behind him, with his feet up in the air, spinning 360 degrees. The IPCC concluded that the police adhered to policy. It was proved in the review and at the inquest that that was improbable or implausible accounts of the officers. In other words, they lied, because it's impossible to do because of his dimensions of his torso. And, you know, they'd even hired a break dancer to try and do that act. It didn't happen. Sean would have had to have been on his head to do that. Okay, so then let's move on forward, where the case was reopened by the IPCC by sheer pressure of the family and the reports and the judicial, the jury's narrative verdict. And last year, they reopened the case as a criminal investigation. And PC Burks came into that court, and I'm going to say, I'm not supposed to say apparently because I could jeopardize the case, he came in there and lied. Yeah. Bearing in mind, unbeknownst to us at the time, he was attempting to become a priest in the Church of England. So he should have told the truth. I'm just going to give you very briefly, because I know time is up and I do want to talk about the CPS decision, right, on the role of PC Burks, because I want to know how the police had decided that to accept his resignation. So I'm just going to briefly read something. Although it is narrowly correct that the jury's narrative verdict did not name PC Burks personally, this was for good reason, because in the Inquisition they couldn't name the officers. It was for good reason. And it was a verdict of a narrative verdict, which is now called, is described as a conclusion. So at an inquest, it cannot, as a matter of law, be framed in such a way as to appear to determine any question of civil liability or any criminal liability on the part of a named person. These are the rules that I'm reading. So these are facts. However, the jury's verdict in this case can only be read as an implicit criticism of PC Burks. And this is because PC Burks was the senior officer of the 4 officers who were present at the time of Sean's arrest and the restraint. The jury was critical of those officers' communication and found that the level of force used was unsuitable and unnecessary, because in the back of the van, the officers claimed at the inquest, when they were on speed back to the station and not a hospital, that none of them spoke to one another in the van. Yet they could see Sean apparently spinning, but nobody said anything. Nobody recognised he had a mental illness. Nobody thought anything of it. PC Burks was the lead officer at the scene, having been an officer for over 7 years, and the jury's criticism of an absence of leadership was a direct criticism to PC Burks. PC Burks was one of the 4 police officers who failed to carry out any adequate assessment of Sean Rigg's mental and physical health. The police officer's failure to do so was described as inadequate. This is what the jurors' conclusions are. PC Burks was the driver of the van inside which Sean Rigg was transported in a cage during his journey to the police station. The jury was critical of the officers responsible for this journey, including PC Burks, as a lack of care. PC Burks was responsible, in part, for maintaining Sean Rigg in handcuffs during his journey to and detention outside the police station. The jury described this as unnecessary and inappropriate. PC Burks was present throughout Sean Rigg's detention in the caged area of the police station, and he did not ring an ambulance until 2016. The police van arrived at 7:53. PC Burks did not dial 999, but he used his police radio at 2016 to call an ambulance. But I will tell you that it was not an emergency call. There was delay of some 11 minutes before Sean was brought out of the van. The jury was critical of the officers at this stage for an absence of appropriate care and urgency of response by the police, which more than minimally contributed to his death. This is what the jury said. Overall, PC Burks was one of the officers who failed to uphold Sean's basic human rights and to deliver the appropriate care. And their words were, he deprived Sean of the appropriate care and failed to secure an ambulance as quickly as possible. Although PC Burks sorry, I won't read that bit. Well, in PC Burks, in his grounds of claim, when he took this to the High Court to get his resignation reversed, he claimed in a detailed statement of facts to place some weight on the fact that the coroner did not leave a verdict of unlawful killing or a neglect to the jury, but that didn't assist him in his arguments. A transcript of the coroner's ruling on these verdicts was attached to our ground, and it included the following. As regards an unlawful killing verdict, the coroner clearly found that there was adequate evidence to show serious breaches of duty on the part of PC Burks, even if there was insufficient evidence to show causational link, which means that they caused the death, that their actions actually caused the death. That was the clinch in the unlawful killing verdict. Did they actually cause his death? So the coroner said there was, but even if there was insufficient evidence to show a causative link between those breaches of the duty, there was a list of 26 areas in which 4 officers allegedly breached their duty of care was present. There was, in my judgment, ample evidence that might amount to serious breaches of duty by officers in another jurisdiction, i.e. a criminal court. and the jury might find or would constitute the ingredients of acts of failure to act in the test for gross negligence manslaughter. In other words, they may not have gone out there to murder him, but their actions or inactions in another jurisdiction of a criminal court could amount to gross negligence manslaughter. This is what the coroner said at the inquest. And as regards neglect, although the coroner did not find there to be adequate evidence of a direct causative link, he did find that there was adequate evidence to enable the jury to decide that there had been a gross or really serious breach of duty on the part of the officers. And he said, I accept that a jury might find that Sean was far more dependent, not only in Brixton Police Station, but as soon as he was handcuffed. And he accepted with regard to the length of time of the restraint in the prone position, the ignoring of the signs of possible difficulties during the restraint of the officers, and ignoring the signs of a lack of responsiveness of Sean, ignoring the fact that Sean may have had a post-restraint cognitive deficit on the estate where he was restrained, failing to check the state of Sean when concern was raised at the outset of the van journey. These were the basic factual things that came out in the inquest. So why were the Metropolitan Police allowing PC Burks to resign, knowing that all of this happened at the inquest and came out as fact, and also knowing that they were now part of another criminal investigation based on those facts? So they were allowing them. So he was allowing him to leave. I instructed my solicitors to contact the IPCC so that I wanted to know the status of the officers, whether any of them had attempted to resign, had resigned, were they on restricted duties, because I knew that this was the card they were next about to play. But I was always 2 steps ahead of them. And we wrote to the IPCC in May, just before a meeting, and it transpired that the IPCC had contacted the Metropolitan Police. They hadn't done so up until now. We were asking for the officers to be suspended back in October 2008, and nothing had been done. A couple of weeks ago, Justice Lang refused for them to lift the resignation on the basis of the gravity of the allegations that the jury found at the inquest and the public pressure by the family, the media, the support, the people in this room. The judge felt that far outweighed his human rights, because he was arguing on the point of his human rights. Yeah? But what about Sean? A man is dead. What about my brother's human rights? This jury found that in the narrative verdict. That was all touched on. So he's in a net, as far as I'm concerned. He's not going nowhere apart from disciplinary hearings, and if I've got anything to do, he needs to go to prison. So that's the issue of resignations. Now, on the back of that, my solicitors contacted the IPCC for statistics as to when officers resign, and 38 police officers in the last 4 years had resigned during investigations by the IPCC. And this does not include statistics where the police investigate themselves. So it's not a true reflection of 38 is not a true reflection of officers retiring, because more often than not, the police investigate themselves. So you can imagine the reality of how many officers have resigned over the years. In all the cases, in all the families that I've met, Even Stephen Lawrence's father, Neville Lawrence, I'd spoken to him, and he supported our judicial review, whereby 30 officers, or a number of, X amount of officers had retired during the investigation of Stephen Lawrence's death. And they were only able to discipline one officer. Yeah, and he was surprised that after all these years, they were still allowed to do that. So we really do need to up the campaign in terms of allowing officers to resign, because that's always their get out of jail card. And the next thing that they get away with, I hope I'm not going on too long, I may have gone over my time, is the Crown Prosecution Service always coming, because then if it gets to the stage where there's a criminal case, which is very, very rare for that to happen, very rare for that to happen, then the CPS always intervene and say insufficient evidence, even though the evidence is ample. And two of the officers in my brother's case, one of them is a sergeant that was there on the night, and the second one is another one of the 4 arresting officers, PC Mark Harrott and Sergeant Paul White. And there was 2 separate investigations. The second one was an investigation into the evidence that he gave at the inquest, where the sergeant claimed that he went to the back of the police vehicle and gave a risk assessment. You remember when I said he was in the back of the yard in the van for 11 minutes? So once a prisoner or somebody arrives in the station, they then become, the sergeant then becomes in charge of his duty of care. So at the inquest, this Sergeant White went into detail about what he saw in the van, that he went to the back of the van, Sean was sitting on the chair, and he looked him in the eye and all sorts. Looked him in the eye. And this is the evidence that he gave to the IPCC in the original investigation, the investigation that was flawed. And he said in his interviews that perhaps they can, I'm going to read you something very small, just to summarize, the decision, which I feel needs to be challenged, and my family will be challenging this decision. And this is a copy of the CPS's reasonings as to the conclusion that they came to, which is, ridiculous, where small parts of it, I won't read it all, but you can go online. I don't really have copies, I'm sorry. You can go online and read a full copy. It's not that long. But basically, the IPCC had conducted their criminal investigation. They sent a file to the CPS saying that the custody sergeant made a false statement to the IPCC's investigators in March 2009, because Sean died in August 2008. The IPCC did not interview any of the officers until almost 7 months later, so in March 2009, which is ridiculous. So they said that in March 2009, when claiming to have attended Mr. Rigg in the van before he was caught into the area outside the custody suite. So they're saying he gave a false statement. This incorrect statement was repeated in evidence at the inquest in July 2012. The police constable made a false statement to the IPCC in 2009, confirming that the custody sergeant had attended Mr. Rigg in the van. So this is the PC who said that the sergeant went to the back of the van, corroborating his assertion that he went to the van, basically. And both the individuals colluded together and agreed to lie to the IPCC investigators and at the inquest. And the CPS has been asked to make charging decisions on these allegations only. So this is what the IPCC said to the CPS. So this was only a criminal allegation about whether he went to the van or not. But these statements, this is the custody sergeant attended Mr. Rigg in the police van before he was brought to the area into the custody suite. But these statements were shown to be incorrect on the CCTV evidence that was produced at the inquest. This is the CCTV that the IPCC had all along, and the police had all along, knowing that he didn't go to the van, because when we were claiming the inquest, when we were claiming the documentation, we were given spliced CCTV by the IPCC. This is the CCTV that they wanted to be shown during the inquest, where Sean couldn't be seen to be walked from the van to the caged area, 50 meters distant. So they gave us spliced CCTV, but we knew that there was evidence to show that he walked from the van, because about a week and a half after Sean's death, the family were able to see uncut versions of the CCTV. We knew within 2 weeks of Sean's death that he was in a problem. So just before the inquest, we were able to fight and pre-inquest reviews to get a full version of the CCTV, and lo and behold, that contained the footage where Sergeant White never left the custody suite. He didn't go to the van, he didn't look in Sean's eye, he didn't do any of that. So they didn't expect the family, or were hoping that we were not going to notice, as far as I'm concerned. And so
Martin,
this is it.
Do you want to
Wrap up?
Yeah.
No, I won't show that bit.
You don't want to show that bit, okay?
No, because I'm sorry I've gone on, but this is just so important. I just want everyone to know the facts where I can speak, and it's the first time I've been able to inform the public about it.
Of course.
So the CPS has basically come back and said no case to answer, and I'm just going to summarise it very briefly as to their reasoning as to why they've decided this. Very quickly. So the prosecutors are to be challenged. I'm going to challenge them, the family intend to challenge them over the controversial decision that was made by the CPS for bringing perjury or perverting the course of justice charges against the 2 police officers whose testimony at an inquest into the death of a man at Brixton was contradicted by the CCTV footage. This is what the CPS should have seen. Mark Harrod and Sergeant Paul White, were both arrested after they were found to have given misleading evidence about the arrest and the detention of my brother. The damning narrative verdict at the inquest found that not only had officers used unsuitable force for an unnecessary period of time who suffered from a mental health issue, their series of blunders more than minimally contributed to his death. These are the facts. The jury had been faced with many discrepancies in the police evidence, where they all contradicted each other by earlier accounts, which was crucially shown by CCTV footage, photographs, police logs, calls and radio transcripts. This was all shown at the inquest. And where Sergeant White gave a distinct, detailed account in the morning at the inquest of what he saw. And when he saw Sean in the van, he claimed that he wasn't worried at all about Sean's welfare. But the CCTV footage showed that White had never went to the van. And there was grainy CCTV footage where Sean was eventually removed from the van and he had been walked, where officers were, on sides of each elbow, walked the 15 meters to the caged area. And then once they'd let him go, he was slumped on the ground. And the jury had concluded that he was not fully conscious at this point when he'd been removed from the van, where Sergeant White said he was fine. Yeah. But he died 21 minutes later in the caged area. And at the inquest, PC Harrod one of the officers, supported White's claim that he went to the van, but later changed his evidence when he was recalled, when it was shown that CCTV showed that he didn't go to the van, right? And it's since transpired, this is the important bit, that before changing his evidence, PC Harrott had seen accounts of Sergeant White's testimony on social media, meaning during the inquest, they were on social media where they were not allowed to do. The coroner had said that none of the officers were allowed to speak to one another during giving their evidence, look at the video, news or the newspapers, just like he instructs the jury not to. So what are the officers doing? So in their written explanation, which you need to go and have a look at, the Crown prosecution said it would have to prove that the pair were deliberately lying rather than being simply mistaken. So even though they'd been speaking, they cannot prove beyond reasonable doubt, the CPS said, that they colluded, even though he changed his evidence, a few weeks later. And they also said that because the officers had never been challenged, because even though they had this CCTV footage showing he didn't go to the van, the IPCC did not challenge the officers in interview about the contradiction. Do you see what I'm trying to say here? And they didn't interview until 7 months later to confirm. And so a CPS said that this would have confirmed in their minds, the officers' minds, that their memories were correct. In other words, the officers believed it in their minds that they went to the van. This is what their reasoning is. But the initial IPCC investigation, which exonerated the officers of any wrongdoing over the death, was subsequently found to be thoroughly flawed, partly because it had accepted improbable police accounts. The CPS also found that although Mr. Rigg's death was the only one at Brixton Police Station during Sergeant White's career, which might have lodged events in his mind, firmly in his mind. If it's your only death, you'd probably remember that. The CPS said there was evidence to suggest that he had a medical condition which impacted on his memory. So, exactly. Where is this medical evidence? Why didn't he say that at the inquest? Suddenly, he suffers from memory loss. Now, the family have known this for ages, and I just couldn't wait for me to say this to you. But that is their conclusion. And it's only because of the damning jury's verdict why, it was found out and all of this, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, basically, where we're at now is that the IPCC is known to have recommended disciplinary charges against those two officers. So we're waiting to hear what the Metropolitan Police say about those disciplinary charges that will happen or should happen by the police, where most that will happen anyway is that they'll be sacked. That's all that happens. So, in every case, a family has to fight these battles of idiotic things that the IPCC and the Crown prosecution does. Just like the Duggan case, where he didn't have a gun, but yet it was lawful to kill him. It's the same thing. The collusion, the officers, the same in our case, they all were sat in a room and got their stories, together. It's just a constant pattern. And I'm sure you're going to hear from the chair, Stephanie Lightfoot Bennett, later on of the United Friends and Family campaign, where this has been going on for years, right? But one day it has to stop because the wheel has turned. Yes, sir.
I wondered if you're dealing with this, whether you think it's possible to have a model of the police that would be more democratic, that would respond to public's concerns rather than following the orders of their hierarchies and acting on suspicion and so on. Whether it would be possible to have a different model of policing that would work in a more democratic way. And secondly, whether you think, from your dealing with the police, that there is appetite amongst the police, there are members of the police who would be interested in reforming their institution, or whether they will just kind of back their
Right.
employers.
A quick short answer is there is a canteen culture within the police that they cover each other's backs because the state covers them, as was shown by the CPS's decision with this ridiculous reasoning. So they can act with impunity or above the law as they feel. But not all officers are bad. And they do have a job to do. But why don't the good officers stand up and speak out for the bad officers to get the rotten apples out? Because it's giving the whole police a bad name. And that's what we need, change. I don't know if or when that's going to happen. I really don't. There is a blog that is being kept by a Metropolitan Police. It's called Mental Health Cop blog. It's very good, actually, very good blog, and it talks about, because the issues of mental health and policing is a very important one now, because at least half of the deaths in police custody are young black men with mental health issues, right? And the working class, they don't just kill black people, they kill whites, black, Indian, everybody. It's an issue for everybody. It's a very important one. So I don't always stress the point of racism because that they're black, even though it's important, and I agree totally. But I think if we, fight the issue for everybody, I think more people will come on board. And the point is the numbers of people to put pressure on this government and the state. The police are accountable to Parliament. It is for Parliament to change the law. And it's them, it's the people that are higher up that've got to change it. And only then, perhaps when they send an officer to prison, an officer will think twice before killing somebody's loved one, because he could actually go to prison. Until then, it's not going to change.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, do you think?
I did answer the second question. I think my first question was more about, because I sort of agree with you. I think that the model of the police that we've got now is only going to support the interests of the state, and it's very important for the state to protect the backs of the police. But could we have a different type of police system where they don't just do what they're told to by their superiors, and that they respond to?
Well, I think they need to look at the mindset of the officers that they're actually employing, their backgrounds, and so forth. The officers on the street, they need to really look at their mindset, because they're racist. They don't give a damn. They're out there, doing whatever they're doing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can speak later.
Right, any more? Cecil, then Michael, then Minka.
Yeah. Clearly, these two institutions, the allegedly independent police complaint body and the Crown Prosecution Service are key protectors of the police in this matter. The Crown Prosecution Service has come out with, I agree with you, absurd. How are you intending to challenge that?
Well, I'm taking legal advice at the moment. Mm-hmm. The Crown Prosecution Service has offered the family a meeting with them, and we're going to take that meeting up, and that's all I can actually say at the moment. It's not an emergency judicial review, but there is now a system where you can, there's a review system. If you look on the Crown Prosecution Service's website, there's a review system that a family can use as a point of challenging them, and you have a certain amount of days to do that. So it's absurd, and I'm not going to just let it go like that, obviously. So whatever challenging system there is, I'm going down it.
Michael.
I actually wanted to pick up on a connection between a lot of what you've just spoken about, Marcia, and something that Cecil was talking about earlier, and that's the cuts programme, and particularly the cuts to legal aid, because Hickman and Rose is one of a small number of pioneering law firms who conduct this kind of litigation and challenging legal reforms. One of the issues in Sean's case is that there is no absolute rule against officers resigning to avoid investigations, and the rules about when officers can be stopped from doing that are actually very narrowly drawn. And so this is just another
There's nothing to stop them.
Aspect of Sean's case that it's one that where this has happened, because it's not, as you said, something that's happened before. And I just wondered how you felt as someone who's relied on firms like Hickman and Rose and lawyers like Leslie Thomas about how the government is now attacking legal aid and people's access to the justice that you're still fighting for.
Well, I think it's a deliberate thing to stop families from fighting, because the police and their cronies, so to speak, are all funded by the police federation or from the public's purse. So they all come in there with their army of people, and the families sometimes don't have any representation at all. I will tell you that in the early days, the legal aid office wanted £21,000 from my family in order for us to have legal representation at Sean's inquest. Are they joking? We refused, and we argued the point, and in the end we had to pay £5,000 towards the costs. Us, not the rest of the police or anybody. The family did. And since which they'd cut the legal aid to even make it more difficult. You know, you have to be unemployed, on death's door, and able to get any kind of legal aid or such to keep your case going, because there's no other way to do it apart from private prosecutions. So that's another area. It's just another part of the system that aims to get you down, and that really does need to make a difference. That really does need to be changed as well. I don't know how we're going to do it, but if it wasn't for lawyers and solicitors like Hickman and Rose and Garden Court Chambers, who were phenomenal, because a family cannot do it without a legal backing. It's impossible. It really is impossible, because I've learned that now, that if I didn't have a legal team, there's no way that I would have been able to get this far. No way. You know, and we've got the other families as well that can give their experiences. So we're not all going mad here. We're all singing from the same hymn sheet.
Question for clarity's sake. Are you saying that the police can resign and then they won't face any kind of prosecution at all?
Yeah, the police are allowed to resign from the police force, which means that they will not face any disciplinary action within the police. So they basically leave with a clean record, and they can go on to another police force or do whatever they want. It doesn't mean that they don't have criminal investigation against them. That is still possible, but that is rare because look at this. No case to answer, and that's what usually happens. It's very rare. The case of Azar Rodney, it's only the third officer in terms of that's been charged with murder in this country.
We only have one in the States.
There you go. So, that doesn't mean anything. The most you can get them on at least is a criminal record, is a disciplinary action. They can get the sack, and they don't need to get their pensions. Their pensions need to be stopped, and so forth. So that's all that happens to them, really. So at least that should happen. But they are allowed to resign. There's no law, and it's actually it's said in the judgment. You can look at the judgment. Justice Lang, in Sean's case on the retirement, where she commented on that there's no area of law where officers, where they can't resign when there's a death in custody. So it's something where there needs to be a change of the law, and I'm hoping that decision. And also the Home Secretary, Theresa May, is also saying that officers should not be allowed to retire, because it's been coming up in so many cases that the government have had to recognise it and admit that. But they need to act, because they've been talking about it since February 2013 that they're going to change the law, but they still haven't done that. So I'm hoping that, the recent events in my brother's case will help towards finally not allowing officers to resign. It may not help the previous cases, but it certainly will help the future cases. And I hope that it can be, the past cases can be reopened, because they need to be reopened, because they literally got away with murder. Yes. Literally.
And the newspaper man who went on to another force and they
Ian Tomlinson, prime example. Yeah. Prime example. In fact, I think that is mentioned in the report, in the judgment. As an example, where the officer that killed Ian Tomlinson had resigned on 2 previous occasions and moved to a different police force. And I think he'd killed before or whatever. Yeah? So this is what they do. Their last card is the get out of jail card to resign. But now they have the Joker card where they cannot easily go, because now it's changed from other families since this case, in my brother's case, where they've attempted to resign in some other cases, and they have been stopped. So it's good.
Sister up there?
I don't think I've got a question, but I think it's really inspirational that you went to this level to hoping to get justice. And it's kind of scary that this is what we have to go to, what you have to go to get this kind of justice. And it kind of shows that how we need to stick together to show that we're not accepting this behaviour anymore, because they do have to protect us, but they're not protecting us, so then who kind of will?
That's precisely the point. So it's, as the film says, who polices the police? Well, we have to, because they're there by our consent. But they're killing us. They're literally killing us. And that has to stop. That has to stop, or be drastically reduced, because I don't know I hope I can see it in my lifetime. But if I don't fight and other families fight like me, because the real justice is in the change of the law, you see? That's where the real justice is, as well as them being made accountable for their wrongdoing. Just that alone will not be enough. We need to change the laws, and one of them is whether they can retire, whether officers, when they interviewed, immediately, because now they're starting to give no comment. There's much more to come later on down in the line in this case, but because an officer's never been to prison, until that happens, they're going to always do it.
Okay, I'm going to have 3 more questions and that's it. I'm going to have to close this down. All right? Okay. Right, I'll take you.
Well, look, I think you're exactly right. Power concedes nothing without a struggle. And what you're doing is exposing the way the system works and so on like that, and that's vital and precious. But I think it's also important to figure out that it's not a few rotten apples in the police force that are going against what the police are all about. The police are a historically evolved institution. Britain and the United States would not be what they are if it wasn't for slavery. If it wasn't for generation after generation of racist police oppression, keeping down the bottom of society, enforcing terror over them, and so on. And we've got to come to terms with that. It's like, what Cecil was saying earlier about the bourgeoisie have got us on the defensive, where we have suffered these defeats. The defeats of the revolutionary attempts in Russia and China and Vietnam and so on weigh heavily on our minds. A lot of people in this room know that there's a system out there. It's a capitalist system. It runs according to the laws of a system. When you're going up against the police, you're going up against the enforcers of the system. But we're afraid to say that. Why? We go out there and we lower our sights and we try to just make a little change here and a little change there. Those little changes have to come to terms with the fact that we're going up against the whole repressive apparatus.
Absolutely. And that's why we've got to unite together to bring a massive campaign in order to make our voices be heard and to show them up with their own law. Let the people decide and let them have their own minds. And the people will know that this system, there is no justice and it is corrupt. That's all I can say at the moment. But yes, I agree with you.
Okay, Sister number 2.
And I think people haven't seen who believes the police all the way through. They really should, because I think that really actually makes that point really clearly that you come up against the forces of the state, you come up against the media that protects the forces of the state, you come up against the IPCC, which is simply there to protect and watch the backs of the police, and then it is a struggle between the state and actually the working class, and particularly black sectors of the working class, who historically have been absolutely oppressed by the police, by the state. My question really, what you just said then about building a campaign, there's 2 parts to a struggle, isn't it? There's the legal struggle that is really, really essential, but it needs to be backed by that people on the streets, people organising. And again, in the film and historically, I've seen as a family what you've done, unite with other families and get all those affected and all those applying the pressure in their different ways out together on the streets. And I wondered if this stage of the campaign, Sean, in the sense, what can people do? What do you need now to be building outside to support?
Just bringing awareness. Yeah, bringing awareness of the issue. Tell it to yours. We live in the world of social media. We can put our own news out there. That's how we got Who Polices the Police. There's the film Injustice that Ken Farrow made, which has been banned from in this country. But the beauty of YouTube and so forth, that we can get the information out there. And I think when you highlight these important issues, it serves to make some difference when there's awareness. We just want the family support. Come out to the United campaign against the United Families and Fans campaign memorial procession, which the chair is going to speak to you guys about later. Once I think they see a crowd of people, of black, white, everybody in this country really standing up for truth, rights and justice, it may make a difference. That's all I can think of, because so far what I've been doing, it seems to be working. And I also think it's important that all the families, that we all get together and we stick together, because we can only really trust ourselves. And when we show the similarities in all the cases, and I want a public inquiry into deaths in custody. If they show all the similarities, CCTV always goes missing. Officers' notebooks always go missing. Officers always collude. In every single one. That's not a coincidence, it's deliberate. And if we can show that, it explodes the whole thing out. That's my philosophy, and that's how I want to play the game. Because it's a game for them, well, I can play it better.
Marcia, how much more voice have you got?
I don't know.
Can you take a few more questions? Because what I'm going to do, because we've overrun, we scheduled, everyone's going to, after the session, we're going to have something to eat. So could you take a few more questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
That's what you all want.
Mika's got a question.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to salute the Rigg family in their consistent campaign for justice.
Thank you.
I mean, in particularly the fact that I know after your brother was murdered by Brookston Police Station, the family actually took up a one-year vigil outside the police station, in which every Thursday, which was the day he was killed, the family was there, and around the time he was killed. And it kind of saddens me sometimes when I come to some of these discussions and I hear people telling me these grand and probably right theories about who's responsible, the nature of the state, capitalism. But I remember during that year, the amount of people that was actually down there supporting the family. And it was not good enough from these so-called militant theoreticians that understand so well the nature of the system in which that we're living under. And so it seems to me that we need to just start to put a lot of this theory into practice if we're going to move forward. And despite all of the so-called analysis about capitalism in here that I hear when I go to various different forums, the fact is that it's been the black community, year in, year out, over decades, that's been leading the challenge against the police state in this country. And it seems to me that it's going to have to change.
I think that's because we used to struggle.
And a lot of people need to, as I said, put a lot of this theory into some practice, because one of the reasons why it seems to me that they're able to respond effectively to certain families now is the fact that they have demonstrated their commitment and their seriousness to struggle. And we're able now, as time has gone on, to reach into different areas of societies, like certain sympathetic journalists, who cannot hide from the reality of the kind of state in which that what we're living in, which is in fact really a police state. And when we go out there and we talk about chanting like, what do we want? Justice. What do we want? Justice. People hear this chant all the time. I think it's important that what we be very clear what we mean by justice. Because I think a lot of people seems to be under the impression that, maybe if we do get a few police locked up, which is good, that maybe somehow that is justice. It's justice in a very limited way. It seems to me, if we're talking about any real kind of justice, it's not about no different model of policing either. It's about really looking at the state. As the London Campaign Against Police and State Violence have been argued, it's about looking at the state, both in theory and practice, to realize that until that state changes, then we're forever going to be seeing these vicious attacks and murders, in which that the deaths in custody, it seems to me, just a tip of the iceberg. They're just a angel town, actually a place where the London Campaign actually meets of how many of our black youth just yesterday, wholesale. And I'm saying that we need to really bring a lot of the so-called people of awareness into supporting these campaigns on the ground. And finally, I would say that you mentioned that the CPS in your particular case is talking about having a meeting with you to discuss their decision not to actually prosecute these officers. Now, anybody that's been at that inquest would have known. Your barrister, Leslie Thomas, made it so plain. When the officer went out the court and came back and changed his story, he made it plain. He didn't mince his word. He said, "You're a liar." And he had nothing to say about that. IPCC was in the court at the time. For them to come back with this ridiculous decision, it's actually an insult.
Thank you very much.
It's an insult. And what I want to suggest to when people talk about support as the practical part of that wider theoretical need for that wider change, is that when you go down to the CPS to talk to them, we should really have a mass protest outside there, amongst our so-called progressives, amongst the trade unions, to say very loudly to the CPS that we're in fundamental disagreement with their backing up of these police. And again, I also endorse the point that you made about our annual processions on deaths in custody on the 25th, to support that, because it's been said and we can't say enough. And the reason why I have to keep on saying it, because I'm just surrounded by so much hypocrites. And I say hypocrites because we always talk about we want to support. But when we come out there in the front line, how much people do we see? It's not good enough, and we've got to change that. So I hope that you support that suggestion. For when you go to the CPS, it should just be the family having a private discussion, but it should be the community making it clear to them that we will support the family's demands for justice. Well,
when we have a date, I'll let you know, Minka. You do the rest. And tomorrow we have a meeting with the IPCC regarding the death. So they're still under pressure, but I'll let you know that date if and when. You do the rest.
We will.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any more questions? There's one more question here. One more, very quick one. Orville.
Listen, it's better be a question.
You remind me of my sister, so.
Question.
A couple of things, yeah, I mean.
Did you hear me?
Very quick, I studied in this room, did my degree in this room, partially, and I watched Injustice in this room. And if you haven't watched it, please watch it, and it will tell you a lot of the journey that Marcia is on currently. And I mean, how many, very quick, and I'll be very quickly and mindful of this time, how many of you vote? How many voted in the last election? You're quite young, so yeah, so not many people. Okay, then how many of you have been on a march with Brother Yinka or Sister Sean Rigg there? How many of you marched? Again, how many of you went to the G8 sort of march, Occupy? Okay, so what we have is already identified an issue. I think protest and marching is all well and good, but it's dealing with the multi-strategy. I've studied media, and so we recognise that we made a film, and that film possibly changed some hearts and minds. I'm not sure, I've seen people writing notes, and I'm hoping that with those notes, as Brother Minky said, you then change those notes into activism, because word without power is ready to be pointless. If you get your degree, you get your MA, that's great. It's what you do with that thereafter. And I want to ask my question now, is where do you see the fight? Is it with the CPS, is it with the IPCC, is it with the police? Because it seems to be, or is it fundamentally the hearts and minds of young people fundamentally, because the road is long, we've lost some people on the road. So where do you see
the fight is with both of them. The fight is with both of them, because basically there's a legal case going on in the background that most people don't see, and it's just what the family do, and it's unbelievable. I cannot sit even in a day and tell you what these people did to us, in order that, the constant battle of the door being closed on us in every single point of trying to get the evidence and blah, blah, blah from the IPCC. So it's the IPCC and then the Crown Prosecution Service. This is not their first decision. Back in 2009, one of the, at the arrest scene, there was a witness that claims that they saw one of the officers hitting Sean at the back of his head with his shoes, which had been removed. Yeah? And the Crown Prosecution Service threw it out with insufficient evidence then. And the IPCC, in my opinion, at that time had only given them summary accounts of what the officers said. The officers had not even been interviewed and all of that. So it's a constant battle with the IPCC, the Crown Prosecution Service. I also, campaign and I give evidence to the Home Affairs Select Committee. I do have meetings with with the police and with mental health, the mental health system, the NHS. I just try and dagger them left, right, and centre. And unfortunately, that's what it takes. I just need everybody in this room. The families just need the public support to help us fight down this Babylon system, because I'm telling you, it's worse than you think.